I wasn't supposed to be there yet. Jessica had planned this whole countryside birthday retreat for her 35th, big rented house, catered meals, her curated guest list of spiritual coaches and startup influencers. I told her I'd be arriving late Saturday afternoon, but I came early. Unannounced. With a manila envelope in hand that contained the finalized division of property papers I'd quietly prepared over the last month. I figured I'd give them to her after dinner. Let her have her day. Instead, I walked through the side entrance of the house and saw it instantly, a massive white and gold banner hanging across the living room. Jessica and Scott, a new chapter. I froze. The air felt thinner. Like I'd stepped into a scene I wasn't supposed to see. Under the banner, a photo album lay open on a rustic wooden table. Dozens of glossy pictures of Jessica and some guy arms around each other at beaches, yoga studios, candlelit dinners, even what looked like a cabin getaway in Aspen. I leaned in and squinted. He was handsome. Tall. Early 40s maybe. Hair pulled back into a bun. The kind of guy who always seemed like he had a quote from Rumi ready in his back pocket. I didn't recognize him at first. Then I remembered. Scott. She'd mentioned his name once, maybe twice, in passing, a guy from one of her project teams. He was nobody, supposedly. Just another tech world collaborator. I thought nothing of it. Until now. The setup was elaborate. Romantic. There was a cake, one of those tiered kinds you'd expect at a bridal shower. I noticed the words written in red icing, to growth, love, and alignment. A cake for someone starting a relationship, not maintaining a marriage. My ears buzzed. I must have stood there a full minute before I heard soft footsteps on the stairs. Jessica appeared wearing a white robe like she just stepped out of a spa session. Her long black hair was still damp. Her bare feet silent against the wood. She stopped mid-step when she saw me. Eric, she said, her hand gripping the banister. You're early. I didn't move. She blinked fast. Smile forced. I thought you were coming after lunch? I figured I'd surprise you, I said flatly. Looks like I'm not the only surprise today. She came down the stairs too quickly, like she thought momentum could somehow spin the narrative in her favor. Oh my God, you saw the banner, she said, almost laughing, like it was all just a ridiculous misunderstanding. It's a joke. Just a dumb inside joke. They made it as a prank, like a bachelorette thing. I turned and looked at her. She kept talking. It's just Scott. He's going through a divorce and his friends, they're all a little over the top. It's kind of this ongoing joke with the team about him and me being work spouses. It's nothing. It's literally nothing. Work spouses. That phrase stuck in my head like a thorn. A harmless label people throw around, right? But here it was, printed in color on thick paper and decorated with pastel streamers and smiling selfies. The kind of nothing that takes weeks of planning. The kind of nothing that everyone here clearly knew about except me. I didn't respond. I walked over to the kitchen island and set the manila envelope down. Didn't even open it. Didn't say a word. Jessica's eyes followed it, and for the first time, her face cracked. What is that? She asked, her voice no longer bubbly. Just small. You know what it is. Her face paled. Eric, please. She reached for my arm, but I stepped back. Behind her, I could see a few heads peeking out from the hallway. Some of her friends. The ones I was supposed to be polite to later over wine and crudité. They ducked back out of view when they saw my expression. I picked up my keys from the counter and walked to the front door. As I stepped out onto the porch, I heard her say it again, quieter this time. Eric, please. I turned back once. Happy birthday, Jess. Then I walked away. Down the gravel path, past the rows of cars, out into the open countryside where the cool wind hit my face like a slap I didn't realize I needed. I kept walking until I reached my car, parked crooked beneath an old oak tree. Once inside, I shut the door and just sat there. I didn't cry. I didn't punch the steering wheel. I just sat in silence, listening to the ticking of the engine as it cooled. This had been coming for a while. I'd known. In that gnawing, gut-level way you know when someone's checked out, when the laughter becomes polite, the touch absent-minded, the phone always face down. I just never imagined it would reveal itself like this. As a party. A celebration. A literal banner. I looked down at my phone. It was buzzing. Jessica, of course. Calls, texts? I didn't read any of them. I put the phone face down on the passenger seat and started the engine. As I drove, the hills blurred past. The trees and barns and vineyards blended into a wash of green and brown and gold. And in the silence of that drive, something settled in me. I wasn't angry. Not yet anyway. I was just done. The drive back from that birthday retreat was the longest 90 minutes of my life. The banner. The photos. The way Jessica's eyes darted when she saw me. There was no hiding it anymore, and truthfully, there probably hadn't been for months. I just hadn't let myself see it. Or maybe more accurately, I didn't want to. I didn't go home right away. I parked at a bluff overlooking the highway, a place we used to stop at in our early days together, back when the biggest arguments we had were over music playlists. I sat there for over an hour, staring into the low horizon and replaying every moment of the past year. Every strange phone call. Every networking dinner she'd attended without me. The shift in her laughter. The way she'd started sleeping on the far edge of the bed. They all made sense now. Every piece fit neatly into the ugly picture I'd been too scared to assemble. My phone lit up every few minutes with her name. First texts, then voicemails, then finally a last message. If you need space, I get it. But please don't make up your mind yet. I didn't respond. Instead, I pulled out the envelope from the passenger seat. It was a little wrinkled from where I'd clutched it earlier, but the contents were intact. Divorce documents, pre-filled and signed by either of us. I had prepared them 2 weeks ago after finding a trail of private emails. Nothing explicit, just an asterisk, mate. Enough to tell me she had emotionally checked out, if not worse. I hadn't confronted her then. I was waiting for something final, something undeniable. I guess I found it. That night, I drove to my brother's place and crashed on his couch. Told him most of it. Left out the part about crying in my car for half an hour. He didn't say much, just handed me a beer and stayed quiet. Honestly, I appreciated that more than any advice. The next morning, I got back into the car with a plan. I would go home, give her a chance to speak, and if she lied, just once, I'd walk. When I walked in, Jessica was already in the living room, sitting rigidly on the edge of the couch. She had changed out of the robe, now dressed like someone preparing for a job interview she knew she wasn't qualified for. Her face was a mixture of guilt and hope. She opened her mouth, but I beat her to it. Who is he? She didn't pretend. Didn't ask what I meant. She just lowered her eyes and said, Scott. Was it just him? I asked. She flinched. That hesitation told me everything I needed to know. It was mostly Scott, she said. There were other things. Nothing serious. That word again. Nothing serious. Like our life together had been an inconvenience, a line item on her list of distractions. I walked to the kitchen, hands shaking slightly, and poured a glass of water. When I came back, she was standing now. I never meant for it to get that far, she said. It started as a connection. You were so busy, and she stopped, catching herself, probably realizing how cliché she sounded. I felt invisible. I nodded slowly. I wasn't going to interrupt her. Not yet. He listened, she continued. He asked questions. He remembered things about me. It felt easy. And cheating is easy? I asked, more coldly than I intended. No, she said quickly. I mean, easier than facing what was broken between us. That stung. Mostly because I'd felt it too. The truth was, I had known something was off. For the past year, we'd been orbiting each other like distant satellites, living together, but not with each other. We passed like co-workers with mismatched shifts. Polite. Functional. But hollow. Still, I hadn't cheated. I set the water down and sat opposite her. What do you want from me? I asked. An apology? Forgiveness? Closure? I don't know, she whispered. I just know I don't want to lose you. I stared at her, the woman I'd built a decade of memories with, the same woman who now looked like a stranger in familiar skin. You already did, I said. We didn't talk much more after that. She stayed in the guest room. I returned to my normal routine, if you can call anything in that moment normal. Each day was a slow unraveling of emotion, of attachment, of who we had once been. 3 days later, she brought up counseling. I told her I wasn't interested in resuscitating a corpse. She cried. I didn't. That weekend, I packed a box, her yoga gear, framed photos, the little tokens we'd collected from our trips. I left it by the door with a note, take whatever you need. But please leave the keys. She moved out 2 days later. No screaming. No drama. Just silence. The kind that echoes long after the door closes. And when it did, when the lock finally clicked behind her, I stood in the middle of that now too quiet house and exhaled. For the first time in a long time, I was breathing on my own. In the weeks after Jessica left, I expected devastation. What I didn't expect was stillness. Not peace, not at first. But a kind of muted quiet that wrapped itself around the house. The kind where you suddenly notice every creak in the floorboards, every ticking second from the kitchen clock. I wandered through the rooms like a tourist in my own life, unsure of what to do with the leftover spaces where her presence used to live. The first night alone, I slept on the couch. Not because I had to. The bed was free now. But because the couch didn't remind me of her. That morning, I made coffee and instinctively grabbed her favorite mug. The one with the chipped handle and the faded print that said "Do more yoga." I stared at it for a while, then set it down like it had burned me. Little reminders were everywhere. A strand of her hair caught in the laundry, a Spotify playlist she'd curated still queued up on the living room speaker. It wasn't even the romantic stuff that hurt most, it was the mundane. Grocery lists scribbled in her handwriting. The sound of the tea kettle, which I realized I'd only ever heard when she was home. One Saturday, I tried deleting photos from my phone, thinking it might help. But every picture was a minefield. Even the good ones, especially the good ones. Smiles felt dishonest now. I kept one from a camping trip 3 years back. She was laughing at something I'd said, no makeup, just sun-drenched and real. I stared at that image longer than I cared to admit, trying to remember what that moment had felt like. Whether it was ever as genuine as it seemed. Maybe it was. Maybe we were real once. But people change. Or maybe they reveal themselves slowly, like a puzzle you thought you finished only to discover you forced the wrong pieces together the whole time. Work became my sanctuary. Long hours at the office, late emails, coffee meetings that bled into dinner. My team noticed. Some said I was on fire. In truth, I was just afraid of stopping. Afraid that stillness would bring back the ache. Then one afternoon I ran into Sarah. We weren't close, she was the mutual friend, the one who always seemed to be around but never in the spotlight. The group friend. But she had always been kind. She ran into me at the bookstore of all places, holding a copy of The Body Keeps the Score. A grim coincidence. "Eric," she said, smiling cautiously. "Hey." "Hey," I replied, surprised by how genuine it sounded. We made awkward small talk. Books. Work. Weather. Then she said, "I heard about you and Jess." "I'm really sorry." I nodded, not trusting my voice. She didn't press. Just offered a soft, sincere, "You didn't deserve that." That night, she sent me a message, "If you ever want to talk, I'm around." No pressure. I didn't reply. Not yet. But the kindness stuck with me. A few days later, a mutual friend reached out, someone closer to Jessica than me. He said, "I don't mean to overstep, but she's been telling people she made a mistake. That she wants to make things right." I let the words hang there before saying, "There's no coming back from that kind of mistake." He nodded like he understood. "Thought you should know anyway." She texted me the next day. It was short. "I'd like to talk. Just once. For closure." I stared at it for hours before replying. "Okay. One time. Nothing more." We met at a small cafe halfway between her new apartment and my office. She looked different, not physically, but her energy was muted. Not the curated confidence she used to wear like armor. She looked tired. Human. She said hi. I said hi. Then silence. Eventually she said, "I thought I knew what I wanted." I didn't. I ruined something good because I mistook boredom for being unloved. I nodded. Let her talk. "I've been seeing a therapist," she added. "Not because I want to fix this, I know I can't. But because I need to understand why I let myself burn down a perfectly good life." I didn't respond right away. I didn't know what to say. Then I asked, "Why didn't you just talk to me?" She looked away. "Because I was afraid you'd listen." That one hit me harder than I expected. Afraid I'd listen? I echoed. "Yeah," she said, "I still down. Because then I wouldn't have had the excuse to leave. And deep down, I think I wanted to." I let the words settle. There it was. The truth I never had before. The part that never made sense until now. We talked for another 10 minutes. Nothing dramatic. No pleas to start over. Just truth. Raw, aching, but honest. At the end, she stood and said, "I hope someday you find someone who never makes you feel invisible." I said, "I already have." She smiled, sad but understanding. Good. Then she left. I sat there for a while after she was gone. Finished my coffee. Watched the rain start up outside the window. Closure, I realized, doesn't come like a lightning bolt. It comes like this, slowly, gently, as a quiet knowing that you're finally ready to let go. I was ready. The day after that cafe meeting, I opened every drawer in the house and started sorting. Old letters, receipts, knickknacks. Some went into boxes marked for donation. Some into the trash. And some into a pile I'd call emotional purgatory, things I couldn't quite throw away yet but also couldn't look at without feeling like I'd been gut-punched. I found an anniversary card from our 4th year, Jessica's handwriting neat, deliberate, and painfully affectionate. "Here's to building a life together, a quiet, real one." My favorite kind. I held the card for a long time, then folded it back into the envelope and set it gently in the fire pit that night. I watched it burn. Not angrily. Not triumphantly. Just solemnly. People say you can't heal in the same place that broke you. I disagree. Sometimes you have to stay to reclaim it. So I didn't move out. I repainted the bedroom. Got rid of the cream curtains Jessica had insisted on. Bought a new lamp. Replaced the mattress, too, not out of spite, but because it felt like sleeping in someone else's ghost. The backyard, which had long been her domain, became my project. I tore out the old planter boxes and built a deck. My buddy Caleb helped, mostly with the heavy lifting, partly as a distraction. We drank beers on the unfinished wood as the sun set, laughing more than I expected. For the first time in months, I remembered what it felt like to enjoy something without guilt. It wasn't all progress, though. Some nights still **ked. I'd roll over in bed and instinctively reach toward the empty space beside me. Or I'd hear a song, something random on a playlist, and feel my stomach twist. You don't spend a decade with someone and just walk away clean. There are threads that don't cut easily. They fray. They hang on. But the difference was I stopped trying to pretend those moments didn't hurt. I let them hurt. And then I let them pass. My therapist, yeah, I finally got one, told me that was growth. Not healing from something, she said. Healing with it. Around the time I started seeing Sarah again. Not seeing her, not like that. Just casual coffees. A walk around the reservoir. A shared movie that turned into a 4-hour conversation in my car about everything from childhood trauma to the best flavor of potato chip. We disagreed. She said sour cream and onion. I said barbecue. It got passionate. She never asked for the full story with Jessica. She just let me bring things up as they surfaced, without judgment, without that look of pity people always try to mask with awkward silence. With her, I felt like I could take a breath and not have it examined under a microscope. One night, as we were wrapping up a long dinner at a place neither of us could pronounce, she looked at me and said, "You don't seem broken." I shrugged. "Maybe I just hide it well." She smiled. "Or maybe you're just figuring out who you are now." That line stuck with me. Because she was right. I had been defining myself through the lens of what I'd lost. Husband. Betrayed. Divorced. But maybe now it was time to ask who I wanted to be, not in reaction to Jessica, but in my own right. So I tried new things. I joined a local basketball rec league, hadn't played in years, but muscle memory's a gift. I took a cooking class. Signed up for guitar lessons. Volunteered at a dog shelter once a week and ended up adopting a scrappy little mutt named Milo who refused to walk on grass for the first 3 days. Milo became my shadow, part sidekick, part therapist. I talked to him like he understood every word. And maybe he did, in the way animals can read pain in your shoulders and joy in your tone. He slept on the couch at first, then migrated to the foot of the bed, then finally wormed his way up next to me like it was always meant to be that way. One Sunday, Sarah and I went hiking. It wasn't a date, at least not officially. But it felt different. Lighter. She laughed at my terrible trail jokes. I caught her staring at me once, and she didn't look away. When we reached the summit, we sat in silence, watching the valley stretch below us in that golden hour light that makes everything look like forgiveness. I turned to her and asked, "What do you think this is?" She didn't hesitate. "I think it's the start of something honest." I nodded. That was enough. A few days later, Jessica reached out again. She emailed a long message about regret, clarity, her own healing. She said she understood now what she'd broken, that she didn't expect anything from me but wanted to apologize one more time. Not for closure, she said, but for the sake of accountability. I didn't respond. Not because I was angry, I wasn't. Not because I wanted her to hurt, I didn't. But because some chapters don't need an epilogue. They need a period. A breath. And a page turn. It's strange, the things you end up keeping. When Jessica moved out, she left behind a dozen or so items she either forgot or didn't want, a pair of earrings in the bathroom drawer, an old scarf buried in the hallway closet, and a half-used bottle of perfume sitting quietly on the bedroom dresser. I didn't throw them away. Not at first. I told myself I'd box them up and drop them off one day. But the truth? I think part of me wasn't ready to let go of the last physical ties to the life I'd spent 10 years building. Not because I wanted her back, but because if I got rid of everything too quickly, it would feel like those years hadn't mattered at all. So the earrings stayed. The scarf stayed. The perfume stayed until one morning I walked past the dresser, caught the faintest hint of it in the air, and felt like I'd been punched in the chest. I grabbed the bottle, walked it straight to the trash, and didn't look back. Sometimes healing means being ruthless with sentiment. That week, I hosted friends for dinner. It wasn't a huge thing. Just 4 of us, me, Sarah, Caleb, and his girlfriend. We ate on the new deck under string lights I'd finally strung after months of procrastinating. Milo wandered between everyone's legs, hoping for scraps and receiving far too many. At some point, Sarah offered to help me with the dishes. We stood in the kitchen, side by side, elbows bumping occasionally. She looked at me and said, "You seem here." I smiled. "I am." We didn't talk about Jessica. We didn't need to. The past was becoming something I could nod at, not something I had to wrestle with. And yet the funny thing about healing is how nonlinear it is. A few days later, I bumped into an old friend of Jessica's at the grocery store. Her name was Eliza, sharp, direct, and always a little too invested in our relationship. She greeted me like she was talking to a ghost. Half sympathy, half curiosity. "You look good," she said, loading produce into her cart. "Better than I expected." "Thanks," I said, trying to keep it neutral. "She talks about you, you know," Eliza added. I raised an eyebrow. "She does?" "Yeah. Says she still doesn't understand how she let it happen. Says you were the only person who ever really saw her." That last part stayed with me. Not because it changed anything, it didn't. But because it reminded me that people rarely destroy things out of malice. More often, it's confusion. Fear. That desperate need to feel something when everything else goes quiet. Still, seeing Eliza reminded me of something I hadn't done yet. I hadn't updated my emergency contact. Jessica had been listed on everything: my doctor, my HR file, even my passport info. The practicalities of separation are so rarely talked about, but they're endless. Unromantic. Necessary. So I changed it. First to Caleb. Then, after some thought, to Sarah. When I told her, she didn't say anything dramatic. She just said, "I'll answer no matter what time it is." That night, I found myself replaying some of those old memories, not out of longing, but out of curiosity. What had I missed? Were there signs in the early days? I thought back to the first trip Jessica and I ever took, a weekend in Asheville back when we'd only been dating for 3 months. She forgot her toothbrush and we shared mine. It felt an asterisk, mate. Silly. We'd held hands while watching the sunset from the Blue Ridge Parkway. I remember thinking, this is it. This is the kind of life I want. And for a while, it was. But even the best stories can lose their plot. Jessica had once told me she wanted to feel like the main character in her own life. Back then, I thought that was just poetic talk. But maybe it was a warning, a quiet confession that she felt more like a supporting role in our marriage than a partner. And maybe I contributed to that without meaning to. It's easy to lose track of each other when life becomes about bills, deadlines, and the slow erosion of spontaneity. Love turns into logistics. Connection becomes coordination. You start scheduling affection. The difference, I think, is that I was willing to fix it. She was looking for the exit. I don't hate her for that anymore. I don't miss her either. What I do feel is gratitude, not for the betrayal, but for the clarity it forced upon me. Because in the ruins of that old life, I found pieces of myself I hadn't realized I'd abandoned. I found that I liked mornings alone, brewing coffee and reading in silence. I found that I still loved live music, the kind of gritty shows in tiny venues where you can feel the bass in your ribs. I found that my laugh had changed. It wasn't bitter anymore. And I found Sarah, who never tried to fill Jessica's place, but carved out a space of her own. One built not on replacement, but on presence. She never rushed me. Never demanded a label. She was just there, steady, open, and real. Eventually, we did have the talk. It was late, after another night of too much Thai food and a movie we didn't finish. She turned to me and said, "So, what is this?" I didn't hesitate. "It's something I don't want to lose." She smiled. Same. It wasn't fireworks. It wasn't cinematic. It was better. It was real. So here I am now, not in the life I planned, but in the life that came next. It's quieter. Simpler. But also fuller. I still think about the past sometimes. But not with ache. More like a healed scar you run your thumb over, not to reopen, but to remember. Because remembering isn't the same as longing. It's just part of the story. And for the first time in a long time, I'm not afraid to keep writing. Love looks different these days. It's quieter. No grand gestures, no urgent declarations. No begging for forgiveness or proving loyalty. With Sarah, it's in the way she texts me to remind me to drink water on long workdays. It's how she laughs at the same dumb joke every time we pass the bakery that sells emotional support cookies. It's how she reaches for my hand without needing a reason. Sometimes I still flinch when good things happen, like they're traps. Trauma doesn't vanish, it lingers like background static. But Sarah never makes me feel guilty for it. When I have off days, she just asks if I want space or company and respects whichever one I choose. I used to think love was about fixing, about filling in each other's broken parts. Now I know it's about standing next to someone while they fix themselves and choosing to stay anyway. We haven't moved in together. Not yet. We're not rushing anything. But on weekends, she brings over her vinyl records and insists we cook together. I chop, she stirs, and Milo sits under the table like he's guarding some sacred ritual. It's not the life I imagined years ago. It's better. One morning, I woke up to sunlight streaming through the window. No alarms, no meetings, no chaos. Just quiet. I lay there for a while, listening to Milo's soft breathing and the rustle of Sarah making coffee downstairs. And I realized, this is peace. Not a moment of silence, but a life where I'm not bracing for the next disappointment. I still carry what happened with Jessica. I probably always will. But it doesn't weigh me down anymore. It's not an open wound, it's a healed place I return to now and then, if only to remind myself how far I've come. I'm not who I was before her. But I'm not who I was after her either. I'm something new. And this life, this warm, ordinary, beautiful life, is mine because I chose not to let the worst thing that happened to me define me. Because I stayed. I rebuilt. And because I finally believed I deserved something better. Not perfect. Just real.